of Will from Battlecross Nation. How you guys doing? Battlecross is a band that a couple years ago released an album entitled Pursuit of Honor that I actually missed reviewing, and I think a couple of you probably had recommended it to me. And for some strange reason, I just never got to it, or something happened there, but Battlecross is finally getting their first official Coverkillernation review today with their 2013 album. And this was a band that kind of took me off guard, kind of took me by surprise, because I know that you guys had given me a little bit of a, nudge to kind of go that way, but then we got a bunch of copies in the store, and they kind of just sat there for a while, and then people started to slowly pick it up. And I listened to that album and was like, wow, looks like I kind of missed something here. So I wanted to definitely check out the new album and give you guys an assessment on it. Now, this is an album that is 11 tracks in length and is about 40 minutes in length. Now, that includes 10 tracks and a Pantera cover of Fucking Hostile, which on iTunes is only shown as Hostile. Apparently, in the world of Apple, you can't say fuck. Well, fuckity, fuck, fuck. Anyway, I would describe these guys describe themselves actually as blue-collar metal, blue-collar heavy metal, but I would describe these guys as thrash metal with a little bit of a melodic side to them as well. Kind of in vein with the, and along the same lines as some of the bands that they've toured with, such as Death or In Flames, but definitely with a little bit more of an extreme edge. There's a lot more energy that these guys really possess. They're really just kind of plugging away. And this is an album that definitely showcases a lot of those different ideals, especially the thrash metal ideal. I really like the soloing on this, the very, very tight-knit songwriting. And for something that tends to pick up and take off a little bit, and especially if you throw that whole melodic death metal tag along with thrash metal, sometimes you get a bit of a perception inside of you that, oh man, this is another one of those bands that's kind of latching on to this idea of melodic death metal that still is kind of alive and well, and there are still bands that do it very, very well. Soilwork and Dark Tranquility, excuse me. This year alone, and then there's other bands, lesser knowns, that are still really putting forth some pretty decent efforts. But overall, this is a concept that's kind of become just sort of a subtext, a subgenre of metal that is kind of latched on with other ones in order to describe certain aspects of a band's sound, but not necessarily all-encompassing their sound anymore. Bands that tend to do just the one sound for melodic death metal tend to get some negative reviews, either that or just are seen as a little bit generic, only because it's something that's been heard a lot. Wait for the revival to occur, because it's bound to happen. With Battlecross, however, I really like the songwriting. There's definitely a fluidity to it. They are not afraid to kind of mix it up a little bit. They are not afraid to mix in some shorter little ideas along with some longer ones, 2.5 minutes all the way up to 5 minutes on this one, and I really, really love the inclusion of the Pantera cover. Fucking Hostile is one of those songs that a lot of bands, especially of the extreme variety, are going to want to cover, considering it has just so much rage and emotion and just, big fuck you to the man, big fist right to all of society that is really just embroidered within it, and this is definitely a song that a lot of bands will really latch onto, and off of the Vulgar Display of Power album, and Battlecross does it very, very well. It's to the point where, comparative to the rest of the album, this is a song that has a very, very different sound as far as the production is concerned. It's something that definitely feels a lot more muddy, a lot more raw, as the song itself really is supposed to sound. Whereas the remainder of the album, the 10 tracks that Battlecross penned, they have a little bit more of a polished sound, a little bit more of a real streamlined approach. And typically with streamline, you would think, and back in the day, it used to be something that was kind of a negative because it didn't feel as pure, it didn't feel as raw, it didn't seem to have that metallic, real gung-ho feel to it. But in this day and age, where we're in the middle of sound wars, where we have technology that really gives us the purest form of sound, regardless of what kind of band you're in, this has become a commonplace idea, and probably an aspect of metal, as far as tradition is concerned, that probably pisses off more purists than perhaps they let on. But it's something that we're dealing with, and it's something that bands are really encouraging, or being encouraged to use. Overall, this album has a great flow to it. It's definitely one that kind of flies by, and it's very, very good for basically anything that you're doing. This is not necessarily an album that you have to sit down and study as you are listening to it. It's something that it can function very well as background noise, and you kind of get the idea. This is definitely one that is going to thrash out. It's going to give a lot of great energy, and it definitely shows a lot of encouragement on the live front to go along with it, to kind of hand in hand go along with it. That these guys definitely show a lot of moxie. They show a lot of strut. You know, it's very, very good to see bands that are just getting started, you know, that are about 2 or 3 albums in, really starting to get a lot of strut to them and a lot of that moxie that really makes the stars of tomorrow. And I think Battlecross definitely has a lot of those things in order to be a real force in metal for years to come, and that is a positive. Now, as far as the album's grade, its rating, how I feel completely about it, you know, I like this release. I liked it a little bit better than their debut. I still think that there is still a lot of room to grow. There's a lot that they can still do in order to make this better. They expanded out a little more with this one, and they kind of start to infuse a couple of different newer ideas. I'd like to see a little more variety whenever it comes to pacing. I'd like to see them really take their crack at something that has a lot more melody driven and a little bit slower, you know, kind of to expand it out a little bit. A great example that I can give is that whenever you listen to Heathen's first album, there's, you know, some longer tracks on there. This was from the second wave or even third wave of thrash metal, depending on your viewpoint. I consider it second wave. It was at the latter part of the 1980s. Whenever they had their first album, it was one that was very direct. It was very, very thrashy. And then with their second album, they almost took the route similar to And Justice for All and Master of Puppets by Metallica, where they expanded out the songs quite a bit. You know, they had tracks that were on upwards of 9 minutes in length, and then they had, of course, the Prisoners of Fate track that was about 6 minutes in length. That was almost their take on really just a powerful, powerful, slower song that just delivers a pretty crushing message. I'd like to see Battlecross kind of, you know, dive into that territory a little bit. That's just a personal thing. It's just a personal idea that I'd like to see. But they're doing great with what they're doing, so whether or not they decide to do that is really up to them, and that is their prerogative. And I really, really like what their prerogative has made. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I'm going to recommend this for everybody. It's coming out on Tuesday, July the 9th, I believe, is the date. I can never remember dates. I don't even know what day it is today. I think it's the 7th. But yeah, definitely check this one out, guys, and I will talk to you guys next time. Peace.